All right, folks. So let's jump right into these essays: the Madipoane Masenya essay and the Jonathan Redding essay. So let's start with the all-important question of the world in front of the text. Right, we've got Masenya, who is from ding 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 South Africa. Absolutely. So she, as we know from previous essays, she's from South Africa. She identifies herself as an African South African woman who is predominantly interested in reading the women in the text, right? And reading women into the text. How are women being treated in the text? What are the ways that this text resonates with contemporary context, right? How has it influenced how women are treated, right? And right now, in this, in Job 3, right, she's thinking about the way in which Job's perspective on the night relates to a African proverb that reads, "A night cannot remove lice from the seams of clothes." And what she's trying to point out here is that there's an underlying terror about what happened, about the things that happen at night, right? The night is inherently seen as dangerous, right? Bad things happen, dangerous experiences happen at night. So in Job 3, then, we see that Job's not only scared of the night, but also of the night's darkness, all the images which were conjured by the ancients when they thought about the night. He has a great distaste for the night. Nothing good can come from it, right? So she moves from there. She's going to talk about the night, the way Job relates to this, but then ultimately what we know now, because we've read Masenya before, is she's also going to connect this to the experience of women or the treatment of women, right? And it's specifically then, because she's talking about Job's conception, it's specifically then his mother, right? And we already know that in the previous chapter, he's just called his wife a fool. And he's disregarding what she's saying. So now let's move into chapter 3 and sort of see the ways in which he's looking at his conception and then also his mom's womb. She says there are some observations that we have to consider, right, as we're looking at Job's perspective on the night and the way that it resonates with this African proverb. She says first, right, and these are the second, third, and fourth paragraphs in the essay. I want you to follow along with me. Several observations are in order. First, in the incantations against the day he was born, he calls on the negative, the night, to come upon his day and mess it up. That's 3-4. He also reflects a narrow view of God and even a distaste for God. So this connects to what we were saying about Job's theology, right? At the beginning, it seems that Job fears God, right? And that may be something that we look at as a reverence, right? He's blameless, he's upright, but it could also mean legitimately that he fears God. He's afraid of God. And he's concerned that if he messes up, God's going to get him. Right? So we see then that he's got this narrow view of God, that God operates only in this particular way. And there's also a distaste for God, he says. That it's assumed that as the day becomes darkened and deprived of light and thus blackened, Job's God would not seek it. Right? So was the night and its darkness not created by the same God who is believed to have been responsible for all creation? The idea then is that that God is not sort of God over all of these things and that good cannot come from this, right? And we can connect this, honestly, to our own situation, and we'll connect this with the Redding essay and suffering, right? A situation like this in which we're dealing with such a pandemic and such anxiety and hysteria, right, there's a possibility of us to sort of like think about things in the same light as Job, right? Oh, God must be doing this to get us, or, you know, or maybe possibly even God is not in control of this, right? Maybe there's some other evil source that's behind this. So again, just thinking critically about our ideas on suffering. The second point she wants to make then is the night of his conception, just like the day of his birth, Job wishes that it would come into oblivion, right? This is 3:3 then, right? Let the day perish which I was born, and the night that said a man-child is conceived. Let the day be darkness. May God above not seek it, or let the light shine on it. Let gloom and darkness claim it, right? She says it's important that we understand that the foregrounding of the night of his conception is crucial, since it shows the importance of women's bodies, not only in providing a suitable home or security for human life at its beginning, but also nurturing life in the very early stages. When he's talking about the day of his conception and the day of his birth, when he's talking about his the gestation period even, right? And he's cursing all these things. He's implicitly cursing the woman's body who held him, right, is what she's trying to say. So third, the incantations leveled against the night of Job's conception are not only 3 times more than those leveled against the day, but they're also more elaborate. So she wants to point out then that it's specifically the night that Job is cursing, just like in the African proverb, right? So she says then, contrary to Job's, let me just point this out too. Job particularly shuns the fact that his mother's womb became fertile ground for the beginning of his existence, right? That it should not be trusted. So she says, contrary to Job, what I would like to do then is, from this South African woman, right? Again, identifying her own identity, her context, her experiences, and the way that that influences her interpretation, right? Always want to be sure that we recognize how our interpretations are always already influenced by who we are, right? It's not necessarily there's one right interpretation, but that each of these interpretations is influenced by the information that we have, the experiences that we have in our identity, right? So she says, she's going to say that the night does have the capacity to remove lice from the seams of clothes. In other words, good things can come from the night. She says, why? She says, first, it's on that night that a woman played a crucial role in the process of co-creation. Second, had it not been for that night, where would Bible readers have gotten the story of Job? Third, Job's character affords readers with a rare model of a male human being who faces the pain caused by grief with frankness and humanness, right? So Job is an important book because we're finally seeing sort of the rawness of human experience and a man being honest about his emotion, right? He's cursing, he's crying, he's in pain, he's just really sort of in that vulnerable, tender space that is what it is to be human, right? And this book is very honest about that. Fourth, through his lament, the reader is also provided with a positive view of death and the place of the dead. She says, a Bible reader coming from the two-thirds world, right? So this is, again, we're thinking about women, not just in South Africa, not just in Africa, but in general in the two-thirds world. And also women even in the first world who are treated as though they are less than human. But a Bible reader coming from the two-thirds world is naturally empowered by Job's observation that in and through death, the ground is level, both great and small. All right, we're just gonna work from where it last cut off. I apologize I'm having some storage issues, but we're gonna get that figured out. So basically the idea that Masenya is trying to capitalize on here is that Job is, or to emphasize, is that Job is pointing out the way in which death is the great equalizer for all, right? Everybody, no matter who you are, rich, poor, you've got the 1%, 99%, whatever, everybody faces death, right? Everybody faces death. And in this way, right, it doesn't matter. We're all united in this one common experience, right? I would say that this is similar to the idea that we mentioned earlier about suffering, right? This is the thing that all of us, nobody's protected from it, right? So she then moves, right? She shifts into this attack on the mother's reproductive organs, right? She's specifically talking about 3:7-10, right? Let the night be barren. She talks about the Leviathan, the stars, because it did not shut the doors of my mother's womb and hide trouble from my eyes, right? She's specifically saying that, she's specifically saying that Job is wanting his mom's womb. He's cursing his mother's womb, right? So Job's attack on his mother's body and reproductive organs does not resonate with the sociocultural reality of an African woman in South Africa. In African cultures, one who wants his or her rival to feel a real pinch will swear at them by swearing at their mother's private parts. Job's misogyny is revealed not only in his distaste for women and their anatomy, but also in his lack of respect for women as human beings in their own right. Right? Job does not have any appreciation for the importance of the human womb, a symbol of life for all human beings, irrespective of their gender and age. Life was precarious in Job's day. It is now precarious in ours, right? There's some interesting connections. How could Job trivialize such a crucial process, right? She's saying he does not honor life and he does not honor his mother's womb, right? Job, who probably played lesser or no role in communal mothering and never tasted what it means to carry a human being in the womb, has the luxury to speak about the female body as he so deemed fit, right? This is kind of what we were talking about when I asked you the last week we were together, who actually cares often about these kind of misogynistic texts wherein the man is benefited and the woman has to serve the man. Well, the people that care about them and are offended by them are women, right? Because often it hasn't been men who have been affected by them. she's trying to point out that Job can do this kind of thing because he has no connection to that, right? And it's not that no men are sensitive to this. Obviously, more and more men over time are becoming more sensitized to women's issues, to their concerns, to their feelings, right? To violence traditionally that is happening against women. But for the most part, men don't have to think about it because it doesn't directly influence them. And so that's my challenge to you today, right? To the men specifically, to really think about the ways in which, though these kind of statements don't directly influence you, though you don't necessarily have the experience of birthing children and nurturing, right? You can still be empathetic as a human being and understand, wow, like what if that was me in that situation? Now, how might that influence or change the way that I think about or do things? And that's what she's trying to get, I think, readers to do. It says, only outsiders to female anatomy can, in their moments of distress, wish that their mother's wombs were their tombs. Because if you yourself actually had a womb, you would not level such a curse. So let's just look, last few points she's making. What about the life of a woman in such circumstances? Distressed men such as Job, whose misery has also inspired him to long for the tomb, apparently did not want to die alone. Their mothers, these women who should have possessed failed wombs, were then expected to serve at their sons' graves, right? She's trying to get us to think about the South African context in which women may have been, or women were, right, cursed, but they still would stay alongside. They would still be faithful to or stand by their men, right? So imagine then that juxtaposition, that contradiction, right? That you're being treated so poorly by the very men that you're loving and nurturing and caring for. In this vein, one wonders whether Job's assault on female anatomy is an indication of the control which men as property owners then and today had and have on the bodies of those who are powerless, right? So here's the challenge to men to really think about this. One thinks of powerless women today whose bodies are controlled by men, sex slaves, prostitutes, girls and women from the two-thirds world who were used for sex trafficking by the rich. Not to mention the many married women, widows and daughters who fall into the same category. Job's assault of female anatomy follows the same line of thinking, men controlling the bodies of women, right? So there's the challenge, right? She says at the end, if Job had an African mother, not only would she have cited the preceding proverb, Job's African mother would have, out of frustration, leveled the following incantation at him for all that he said against female anatomy. Would that the old men wives would have sat on you immediately after your delivery onto Mother Earth. So basically, you cannot talk to your mother like that, right? You need to respect women. So there's Masenya's essay. If you have any questions, again, you're welcome to bring them to me via email or through discussion threads.